It's undeniable that a core duty of a man is to be capable of defending himself and others from harm. We have an innate desire to fight, compete, and to prove our strength, but for some, this competency is neglected or seen as a simple means to an end. For others, it becomes a passion and a way of life. Our guest today is one such individual. Alex de Wilde moved from his home in Belgium across the world to Thailand in order to pursue Muay Thai. Today we discuss his story, how to get started training, why you need to take risks, discovering your passion, why nobody should take life for granted, and much more. I am your host, Gabriel Schickler, and welcome to the Operation Paragon podcast. Obviously, the most prominent thing about your brand is your martial arts journey. And so before we get into the more technical side of things, I'm really curious to just hear, about your story, what got you interested in Muay Thai specifically, of all the different options you would have for martial arts, and then why you decided to, move across the world to pursue that.
When I was a kid, I always wanted to box because in Belgium, it's like boxing and kickboxing. I never had like any interest in like football or something like that. But my mom in particular was like, you can't, because if you fight in boxing, you will have like an ugly nose. That was the only reason she gave me for like not being allowed to box. And as a kid, I didn't quite understand that. So I kind of settled with karate.
Mm-hmm.
I was allowed to do that because it was like a no contact sport. But then after like a couple of years of doing that, I was like, I want to compete. And my parents said, you're not allowed. And then I was like, well, there's no fun in this. Like, why am I training? Like, I couldn't see there was no purpose. So I just stopped. And then I like went into like different sports. Eventually ended up playing football, funny enough. Then later on in life, I was like depressed and suicidal. Back then, I assumed it was due to low testosterone levels. So I fixed my testosterone levels, which was not the root cause, but it definitely helped. And so when I reached like the high testosterone levels, I was like, well, I have this now. So what do I do now? Because I was like, I kind of reached an end point. And then I was like, I felt like an itch to compete. And so around that time, Conor McGregor became really, really popular.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I went into MMA in 2016, but never competed. And then you can fast forward this. So I basically trained about like a year and a half. I switched gyms because I didn't compete. And I was like, what is this? Then I started hearing stories about Thailand. Oh, you can compete there every day. Oh, that sounds interesting. And then I was like, oh, they don't have amateur fights. I was like, oh, that sounds even more interesting. Because for me, amateur fights are kind of ridiculous. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to have the real deal. So eventually I quit my job, stepped on a plane, and went to Thailand, not knowing anything about Thailand or Muay Thai. I just knew I could fight here.
Wow. Yeah, so that's quite an adventure. So you've been doing, I guess you said you've been doing all this since like what, 2016? So this has been years and years.
September 2016, I started MMA, yeah.
Wow. And so was it Muay Thai itself, or was it just that total immersion that was really attractive to you?
From an MMA perspective, I was like, Muay Thai is the closest to MMA. If you look at the package, it has like almost all the weapons except the ground game, but quite a complete sport if you want to transition back to MMA. So that was the original logic behind it. But then later, I got bored of MMA because it's kind of turning into WWE. I was like,
oh yeah,
I got very bored of that. And then I started learning more about like Thai culture and Muay Thai, and that's how I was like, okay, I'll rather not do MMA and just focus on Muay Thai instead.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think I told you, a couple of weeks ago, I do have some experience with jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and things like that, but I've never done Muay Thai. But from what I understand, it's one of the, I guess like the most brutal combat sports, because you've got your elbows, you've got your knees, like, unlike MMA and things like that, there are fewer, rules, fewer things that are illegal to do and stuff like that. So would you say that it's like the closest sport to a real fight, if that makes sense.
Yes and no. I would say MMA is closer because in MMA it doesn't stop.
Mm.
So like in MMA, even if you get knocked down, you can still go to the ground. There's
Mm-hmm.
no referee stopping it. While if you fight Muay Thai, if you get knocked down, they give you an 8 count. So
Gotcha.
in that regard, not really. But based on how the traditional Muay Thai, based on how the scoring system works, I find it more interesting because, for example, they do narrative scoring. Well, unless they change it in the future, which
Mm-hmm.
might happen. But original scoring system is narrative scoring. So you don't score round per round. You score the fight as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you're fighting, you're telling a story. For example, if you fight really, really strong in round one and round two, but round three, round four, you look really tired, you're never gonna win that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And like showing pain looks really bad. That can cost you a fight. That cost me a fight, by the way. I was like,
Really?
really? I was like, yeah, that cost me a
Wow.
fight because I was injured. I was like, what do I do? And he's like, yeah, show less pain. I'm like,
Wow.
uh,
Wow. So then, with what you were saying earlier about your journey and kind of what got you started was wanting to address depression. And it sounds like, you found your way past that. So if there's somebody listening to this that's, maybe not content with who they are or where they are in life, what would you say would be the first steps they should take to start addressing that?
the first step you have to take is literally accept it because the majority of people kind of live in denial. And if I
Mm.
think back on my days back then, it's like I almost drunk myself twice into a coma. But like the people around me, they thought it was funny and they were taking pictures and videos.
Mm.
To them, that was normal because there's probably somebody every week doing that when you go party.
Mm-hmm.
But that shouldn't be labeled as normal. So I think it's kind of hard, but that to me was like the first big step, like accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so something is wrong. Like my life is going completely in the wrong direction.
Gotcha. And then what would you do after that, initial just acceptance? Like, would you focus on looking back, would you focus on your testosterone levels? Would you focus on something else? Like, what would be the next few steps there?
Well, back then, focusing on the testosterone levels just gave me purpose. So giving myself a
Mm.
purpose as a young man, like that helped me a lot because I had something to focus on. And because I was focusing back then on like healthy testosterone levels, I just created good habits. And that kind of
Mm.
helped me improve my life. It didn't fix everything. Obviously, there was more to it, but that helped a lot
Mm-hmm.
because it started with like I was already working out, but I was like, okay, now I'm gonna start waking up every day at the same time. I'm gonna make sure that my nutrition is better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make sure that I read. I'm gonna make sure like that's how it started. Like I just started adding habits, and after a year, I was looking like at my life and I was like, I improved. Like yeah, I saw improvements. Like I definitely felt it like in in my happiness, and then I also started
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what made me unhappy because that's another big thing that I think a lot of people they can't answer it. It's like what makes you unhappy? It's like there's
Mm-hmm.
two questions, right? What makes you happy, but what makes you unhappy as well?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting too. I just want to highlight one of the things you said, which you look back after a year. So it's not like if you're in a bad position, you can just snap your fingers and switch things over. It's a process. You have to build those good habits. You have to stack those wins, and it doesn't look like a huge difference between any 2 days. But if you look back after a long enough time, awesome. And then one other thing that I really want to touch on is the value of immersion, right? Because obviously you're over in Thailand, you're completely inundated with the culture of Muay Thai and everything like that. So how do you feel that has impacted both your rate of training and just getting better, and then your life as a whole with respect to that?
I mean, when I decided, so originally I was gonna come out here for a year. The second time I came, but then the lockdowns happened, so I got stuck here. But when I
Mm.
left for the second, well, I decided to stay. But um, when I left for the second time, my grandfather said, if you're very honest, you don't really fit in Western culture. You fit more in like an Asian culture. I remember that. He does miss me though, but he said that, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's interesting. So I don't know. It just it's kind of like everywhere. Like everywhere you have good and bad people, and I just try to take the good everywhere I go.
Mm.
But definitely found that people here are very very generous.
Hmm.
That stood out for me. They would literally give you their food and be hungry for a night. Very
Wow.
helping, and if you like my Thai, I mean, I've been here for 5 years. My Thai is still not what it should be.
Hmm.
It's K1 level right now, so it's horrible. But when you try, they will try too. It's like yeah, it's a very interesting culture, man. Recently, I lost my wallet. I left it
Oh.
in the gym. It fell out of my bag,
Hmm.
and I didn't realize it until the afternoon. By the time we called the gym, that wallet was still in the same space.
Wow.
No, I'm not saying this is gonna happen everywhere in time, but there is a lot of stories like this
Hmm.
where people lose their stuff. They find it same spot and like nobody touched it.
Awesome. That's really interesting. So why do you feel you fit better in an Asian culture than, the one that you were raised in? Like, what's the difference there?
I think if you compare it to Western culture is very stressed, but nobody knows why they are stressed.
Mm.
That's how I always felt it. Like people are running around like chickens making noise, but there is no reason why they make noise. They're just running around.
Hmm.
Like, and if you stop them and you ask why, which I have done, it's like, why are you stressed? It's like, I don't know. It's like always like they're always like one step away from a breakdown. They're always tensed
Hmm.
up.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's so true. Because I think a lot of the times in the West, we have a huge focus on being productive and contributing, but oftentimes people will. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. Maybe you disagree, but uh, I think a lot of the times people will make themselves busy to feel like they're being useful or being productive or something when they're not actually achieving anything, and they're just doing that to block out the noise of doubting themselves or having to just sit with their own thoughts or something like that. So that's a very interesting point. um so with respect to uh training Muay Thai, you had something on your story a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, where you were talking about how the way the uh I guess the masters will teach you isn't like in the West, where they will sit down and say, okay, here's the lesson, here's what you need to know. They more just kind of do what they do, and it's up to you to pick up what they're doing. Was that a big adjustment for you to switch between those styles?
It made more sense here because I mean here everybody that has money can open a gym too. I mean that's everywhere, but like the West general, most people don't really have like a long career of like a lot of experience. So what they teach is like a dumbed down version of the sport.
Mm,
When you come here, it's like passed down generation by generation. And I'm not saying every gym that's here is going to be world class. There are gyms
mm-hmm,
like that here that are obviously not the best either. But before, you had to learn the basics before you could do anything else. So they would like
mm-hmm.
teach you all the basics, start with footwork, start layering it. That's when they start going. So I went through all of that. It's like they were like, I remember that one of my first trainings, they looked at me and they saw me shadowbox and they say like, okay, you have experience, but you don't know Muay Thai.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you're a beginner. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So for people that want to come here, they have to come with that mindset, because I see a lot of people coming here and it's like, oh, I have fight experience. It's like, okay. And even if you have Muay
Mm,
Thai experience, even if you have Muay Thai experience abroad, scoring system is not the same.
hmm.
Mostly you abroad you fight 3 rounders unless it's a title fight. So they come here with that mindset of like, oh, I'm gonna knock this random Thai guy out, only for them to be completely taken to school for 5 rounds. And then they're
Yep.
like, oh, if I fought this guy back home, I would have won. I said, well, you're in Thailand. Like, what's your
Hmm.
point?
Yeah. No, that's such a good point, especially if you're um, like just a boxer or just a wrestler or something like that. You might have one part of your game really dialed in, but then the rest of it, you have no idea what's going on. Um, yeah, that's huh.
Plus, it takes quite a while before you actually figure out how the real scoring, in the traditional sense, how the scoring system works. It took me eight,
Mm,
and even now, sometimes I watch fights and I'm like, oh, this guy is winning, and then they give a decision to other guy, and the Thais are like, yeah, this is why. I'm like, huh.
mm,
So it's like it's very, it's like I said, it's like a narrative, but it's hard to read
hmm.
sometimes.
Gotcha. And so for somebody that's looking whether they want to be as extreme as you and move to Thailand and be completely immersed in that culture, or if they're in Europe or the United States or something and they want to get started training. I have my own thoughts on this, but what would you say are the indicators of a good gym versus a bad gym, and the people you want to learn from versus, like you were saying, the ones that are uh, more dumbed down version of the sport, if that makes sense?
I mean, there's a couple of indicators. Like if you go to like any big gym here and you're like a nobody, they're not gonna give you attention. They basically want your money. And I've
Hmm.
talked about this a lot, and some people have come at me for that. But I'm like, I'm not even naming gyms. I'm just saying don't go to the big gyms. People give me shit for that.
Hmm.
So like they're not gonna teach you. And they're like, yeah, they teach me. It's like no, they just hold pads for you and let you kick it back, and then you can take a picture with the superstar, and then it's time to go. So I think that's the big mistake that most people make, but I also understand why they make it, because those are the gyms that have big budget. So they
Mm,
can do like Instagram marketing and other social media marketing. Another one is like a gym filled with tourists. That's mostly not the place to go. That's also the
mhm,
places where they mostly kind of go away from the traditional culture.
mhm,
Gyms where they spar extremely hard, I would avoid at all costs. Gyms where they don't really teach you, but they say like, oh, if you take a private with me, I will teach you. And I say,
mm,
well, why do you pay a membership then? What's the point of it?
mhm,
And then I'm kind of making an introduction to this now on Instagram, but this is hard to explain for a lot of people, but pad work is very important
mm,
as a fighter or just in general to learn. And a lot of gyms, they don't give you proper pad work.
mm,
Like a lot of gyms, especially because like foreigners in general are bigger than Thais, so their kicks are more powerful, so to say, because there's more weight behind it.
mhm.
So the pad man will be like, "Oh, your kick is powerful. Okay, 10 kicks," and then they do some random combinations and make people tired, but they're not learning anything. If anything, they're getting worse.
I
Yeah.
had I
So
had that exact experience, so I completely know what you're talking about.
there's a lot of gyms like that.
Mm,
So that's why I started a mini series on that,
mhm,
uh, with the Chai twins, like them explaining what proper pad work actually is. And it's difficult to talk about this because like when I asked them to film those videos, they were like, "We don't want to talk bad about other gyms." And it's like, I know what you mean. I don't want you to talk bad about any gym, but I want you, in your words, to say what you think is proper pad
mhm,
work. Because if I would explain this too, I'd be like, I would say, okay, if you go to this gym, you see bad example,
mhm.
but you cannot do that because, yeah, you
Gotcha.
understand, right?
Yeah, yeah. So can you go into a little more depth with why the pad work is important? Because I can see somebody saying, well, like Alex, those are just drills. I'm not actually in the ring with somebody. I'm not exactly going at it. So wouldn't it be better to practice against a live opponent instead of, just hitting an object? So what's the importance there? Just, so I and the listeners understand.
Pad work shapes you as a fighter. So basically, the way they hold pads for you is a close representation of how you're gonna fight, unless you really know what you're doing.
Mm.
So, for example, because I've been here for a while, if I have somebody on the pads, say I go visit the gym, and I know they have like this high volume style, I know I'm just gonna get a conditioning workout. I'm not gonna get anything out of it.
Mm.
But if you do it every day and you don't understand what you're doing, once you go into the ring, you're gonna fight like that too, and it's gonna look messy. For example, gym that I visited last week, they focus on the basics. So at first they check all your basics, like okay, is your jab good, your cross, your hook, your
Mm-hmm.
kick, and then they start working from that. They don't do like 10 kicks, 10 kicks. They say if you want to train hard to have a fight coming up. First to learn basics, timing, currency. That's what you should all learn on the pads first.
Mm-hmm. So instead of saying, 10 kicks or whatever, what would be those indicators that they're teaching you the proper fundamentals and basics?
Well, kind of depends where your skill level is at. If you're a complete beginner, then they're gonna start obviously with like the jab and the step on everything. They're gonna focus a lot on your footwork first.
Mm-hmm.
If you have more experience, mostly they will just see where you're lacking something. For example, for some reason, the Pincy Chang guys, they never like my switch kick. It's the only gym that doesn't like it. They have like a very odd way of doing it. And so I get to work a lot of my left kick when I work with them.
Mm.
And then with me, the first round, they will always add in defense because I already have experience. So they will call out what I have to do. And then the rounds following, because we understand each other's timing and rhythm, they will freestyle it.
Mm.
And that is something that is lacking in today's pad work too. Is like a lot of people, they do pad work and they do like their 10 kicks, their combinations, they do that the whole fight camp. And then they go to the fight and they fight like that, but they're not used to getting hit.
Mm.
Nothing is thrown back at them. So they have this bad habit of just like finishing their stuff and maybe they drop their hands, maybe they take a look at the clock. It's like you can
Mm-hmm.
create a lot of bad habits just doing pad work.
Mm. So then what would you focus on instead of, um, I guess what I'm asking is the pad work just about isolating the one motion so you get it correctly and then weaving it in with the rest of the things you do? Because, like you're saying, obviously you don't want to just have 3 move sets that you do on rotation, right? You want to be able to react, you want to be able to take hits, you want to be able to, throw an elbow or a punch or a kick or whatever when it's appropriate. But what would be those, I guess, like the principles to actually know that you're making progress as opposed to just checking the box and moving on, if that makes sense?
Well, it all depends on your skill level. But like if you're a beginner or like close to beginner level, obviously you're gonna focus a lot on the same stuff. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to rep it. It's gonna be repetition after repetition. And even now, living it for 5 years, I do a lot of kicks every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like kick, 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 kick. So many kicks in my life. It's unbelievable. Oh, but everything depends on your skill level. Sometimes even with more experienced people, they will only focus on one thing to fix.
Mm.
But what I think, and this is advice for beginners, is like if you go to a proper gym and they start teaching you the basics, don't get frustrated because it takes a long time because you just keep doing the repetitions. Once you get the basics down, you can start adding things. But most people, they want to skip the steps and go to a higher level
Mm-hmm.
without having the basics, and that's when stuff can go wrong in a fight.
Yeah. Yeah. How important is it to have, um, so you mentioned, wanting to go to a smaller gym and getting more of that, I guess, like the relationship or at least more attention from the person that's training you. Um, How important would you say that is to, your overall success in correcting your technique? Because like we said earlier, they're not necessarily going to take you aside and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. They're just going to show you the right way to do it. So how important is it to have that more personal instruction, if that makes sense?
I mean, I think everybody benefits from it. Like
Hmm.
even if you're a student of the game yourself, it's always helpful that somebody first off understands your style. Oh, there goes my camera. That somebody understands your style uh, and can teach you the style that you're going that you want to learn. Because in Muay
Hmm.
Thai, there's also a lot of styles. For example, I've always liked the Muay Thai or the technical style.
Mm.
If I start working with like people that are like clinchers or knee fighters or like really forward fighters, that
Hmm.
style is never gonna suit me.
Mm.
So you also have to find somebody that understands your style and teaches you that, rather than going to some random gym and training not necessarily with the wrong person, but like the wrong person for your style.
Mm.
And for
Gotcha.
some people, this is difficult because in the beginning when you come here, you don't really know what your style is. You have to like figure it out along the way.
Hmm. And is that just a matter of trial and error, or are there some principles or indicators that you can use to really figure out what fits you? Like, and even not just in Muay Thai, but let's say somebody is trying to pick between, do I want to do um, kickboxing, MMA, wrestling? Like if they're trying to pick a combative sport in general that would be a better fit for them, what would you say would be those guidelines or principles that they should use? Or are there any? Is it just a matter of trial and error?
I would say just try it. Like I experimented a lot with like my style, but
Hmm.
like I'll when I there's like one fight I had tape on the guy, so I won that fight by TKO, and everybody was like, "Oh, this fight was amazing." And I looked at that tape and I was like, "This is the ugliest fight I've ever fought." I was so embarrassed by myself. Like, I cannot watch this. And so I was like, and I was like, I never want to see this again. I never want to fight like that again.
Hmm.
So it's like kind of trial and error. In the beginning, when I came here, I used my hands more and less my kicks because I wasn't used to it. But over
Hmm.
time, my style changed based on just seeing people spot. I always like the tricksters. I always
Hmm.
like the smart. I never like the guys that come forward and look like they got hit by a truck.
Hmm.
Yeah. Then if you look at the deeper meaning and Muay Thai, one of my teachers once said, Muay Thai is about self-defense. That's the main principle. So if you win
Hmm.
a fight, if you look like you went to war 3 times and you're barely standing, okay, you won the fight, but what did you gain from it?
Hmm.
He said sometimes it's better to lose but be unscratched than to win and look like you'll be a week in the hospital.
Mm.
Because the person that looks like that doesn't understand the art.
Gotcha. And is that with respect to training Muay Thai specifically, or is that a principle for, any fight, any sport?
I think Roy Jones Jr., the boxer, he talked about this one. So I think this is a principle that
Hmm.
basically has been talked about in any combat sport. But there is this famous video of Roy Jones saying, when I went to the gym, I knew what kind of fighter I was because I knew my jab, I knew my cross, I knew all the
Mm.
defenses. But now those guys just want to spar and hit the bag and probably want to look cool on Instagram. They don't want to learn the basics anymore. And I think
Hmm.
that's so I think all combat sports started from the same idea, but eventually got kind of watered down.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I do think what you were saying earlier about the kinds of gyms to avoid, I feel like, and correct me if you feel this is wrong, but a lot of the times you can tell more about the quality of a teacher from their students as opposed to the person themselves, because they can put on a good show. But as an example, I took a few months of Krav Maga lessons a couple years ago, and I went to this gym in town. But the lessons didn't really seem serious because it was, one big mixed class, maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50 people. It was, pretty big by all standards. And it was complete mix of age ranges, body types, physical ability, stuff like that. And so, you'd have, you'd get partnered up, you'd have somebody with the pads that didn't really know what they were doing, or they had a really bad center of gravity, so you didn't want to hit them as hard as you could because you just knock them over. We did this one drill where you would take those really big like shield pads and you would surround the person and basically just shove them around and beat them up. But there were a few people that were really out of shape that we were kind of expected to just like go easy on and almost like let them win, like you would with a kid if you were just like play fighting with them or something. um and I was looking at that and I'm like, okay, maybe the instructors know what they're doing, but they're not really approaching it in a way that's going to benefit me long term, because like you were saying, it was just 10 kicks or throw these punches or whatever, or they would have you be like, oh, you should just hit the bag as hard as you can for this drill or something like that. And I feel like that sacrificed a lot of technique. But when it comes to like judging how much an instructor can really teach you individually, how much does the people present at their gym really affect that perception in your mind?
I mean, this kind of takes experience because like my first coach was not the best either, but he was the only MMA gym close to me.
Mm.
So I went there, but he started his gym as a white belt in jiu-jitsu. That should have been a red flag. It was a blue belt by the time I arrived.
Wow. Yeah.
There were a couple of red flags there. I remember one time he had like this very vengeful attitude, which is very odd for like, I mean, he was an MMA coach, jiu-jitsu coach. For a jiu-jitsu
Mhm.
guy, that's very weird. So he injured a
Yeah.
lot of people. But one time, I still don't know why. I think he just wanted to get the submission. I was in a position that we drilled that whole training, and I assumed, obviously, it was better than. I assumed that he wanted me to show that I remembered how to get out of that position.
Mm.
But I felt that he was using power, and I was like, if I move now, he's gonna hurt me
Mhm.
because I feel resistance, like something is doesn't make sense. And he used his legs, like the power of his legs, basically smacked me over and armbar me. But so I fell on the back of my head.
Oh
So
wow.
obviously, yeah, I had a headache. So the next day I skipped on training because I had a headache. And I told him like, hey, I can't come, like I'm injured. That's what I just lied about it.
Mhm.
But when I told him that, he was like, oh, you're injured again. Huh? He's like, you're never gonna be a good fighter if you're injured all the time. I was like, oh, like this is a big red flag. That was close to the time I left. But that was
Mhm.
one of the reasons why I left. I like stuff. I started seeing stuff more, and like
Mhm.
this is not a good place to be. Plus, back then we had like a heavyweight coach. It was like 104 kilos. Back then I was like 65, and he would take like joy out of like
Wow.
liver shotting. He would take the joy out of liver shotting people, just knocking people down with liver shot. I was like,
Wow.
you're twice my size.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when it comes to like people being present for like combat sports, it's quite difficult
Mhm.
because I joke about this with a friend of mine, but combat sports do not attract intelligent people.
No, you're right.
Yeah. So
Can't get hit in the head too many
yeah,
times.
not even that. They don't even need that. They just come in the gym and they're already like that. Uh, yeah. But I I would say for combat sports, obviously look at the people that are in the gym. You can kind of pick up how a gym is based on the people that are there.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's gonna be every gym has people that have like a screw loose.
Mhm.
So I would say also look at the instructors. Like, how are they teaching? Like, are they actually passionate about what they're doing? Like, are they teaching you like a philosophy, or is it just like the same stuff over and over again, where you get better at technique but have no clue what you're doing?
Mhm.
Because if you have good technique, but you don't know what you're doing, you might as well just play Russian roulette with the guy that you're gonna fight.
Yeah. And that would be like you understand the individual pieces really well, but you don't know how to fit them together to actually fight with them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. For example, when you start a fight, the first two battles are the battle of positioning and the battle of distance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So basically, when you fight, they say protect yourselves at all times. That's the first rule of fighting. Yet there is like, I don't know how many highlight videos there are of guys touching gloves, and then the other guy takes a cheap shot, which is not against the rules. It's a cheap shot, but it's not against the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy gets knocked out because he doesn't understand distance. He comes in with like a bend arm, keeps it under his chin.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to understand everything. So a lot of people don't understand, and this is where pad work comes. A lot of people, when they stand at the pads, they stand like really close. So
Mm-hmm.
and then they reset in front of the guy. They're always like running into shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a guy that keeps running against the wall and doesn't know that if you third, walk away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so outside of your just ability as a fighter, have you seen any other benefits to any other areas of life, like whether it's your mindset, your physique, your endurance? Like, what other benefits do you get out of fighting aside from just learning the skill?
I mean, obviously, I don't always like to say this word because people misinterpret it. They being humble. Fighting teaches you to be humble, and I don't mean like getting stepped over, like run over by people. Like obviously, you can. Well, what's the saying again? Set boundaries. You can set boundaries. People don't run over you quickly, but yeah, that's how people see being humble these days. Obviously, I mean there are fighters that have like giant egos, but that's every sport. But in general, most fighters are very down to earth.
Yeah.
Because they understand the consequences of fighting, but they also understand what they're capable of. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so you know that, well, you know your skill level, so you know that you can be confident in it, but you also know that there are plenty of people out there that can just kick your ass if they want to.
Exactly, because like if you run around in Thailand in any gym, there is people that 55 kilos, put them on a normal clothes, they look like really shy people, and they would put you in a body bag in 5 seconds.
Yeah, that was something that was really good for me, especially when I started doing jiu-jitsu, because like the trainers were there were 3 of them, and they were all these middle-aged dudes that they weren't in great shape. They were kind of overweight. They were losing hair, all these different things. And so on the surface, they don't look all that threatening. But I know, if I tangle with them, maybe because they're not boxers, I could get in a few hits or something. But the second they get me in a grapple, I'm done. One of the most embarrassing rounds I ever fought was against one of them, and this guy put me in like a standing armbar, so we didn't even go to the ground before he submitted me. I'm not sure I could recreate it, but he basically like hooked his arm underneath my tricep and then just started to crank down. Yeah, and it was one of those things where you don't see it coming, and then you're like, oh, that's nice. Yeah.
That reminds me, I used to during the lockdowns here, Alachai, his gym used to be open because of like open air. So Alachai has like a 90% win record in Muay Thai. He has like 200 fights. So he was quite a genius. And so because I really liked the style, I would go there and every day I would be like, hey, can you teach me your style? And eventually he started like teaching me, put me under his wings. Then one day I was like, Arachai, every time you train me, you're orthodox, but when you fought, you were southpaw. Why don't you never like train or spar southpaw with me? I was like, yeah, I learned how to be an orthodox fighter because most people are orthodox, so it's easier to teach them. And then he said, but if you want, I can go southpaw.
That was the hardest round of my life.
I bet. Yeah.
I mean, we just play sport, but yeah, completely taken to school.
hmm Yeah. Man, that's amazing. And so for somebody that's looking to, let's say they're a total beginner, maybe they've gone to the gym a little bit, they've worked out, but they've never really, been in a real fight or trained it in any serious way. What would you say would be the first thing to focus on? Would it be technique? Would it be conditioning? Would it be um, endurance? Would it be knowledge of the sport? Would it be just getting a couple things down really, really well and worrying about the details of other stuff later? Like, what would be that top priority for you to, start setting yourself up for success?
My top priority for them, I would say, figure out if you're really willing to put in all the repetitions. Are you really willing,
Mm,
like put in all the time you really need to get good at this? Because if the answer is no, I would highly recommend you to never step into a ring. Because what is dangerous, and I've seen a lot of people get hurt because of that, because they don't respect the art.
mm,
You have to respect the art. You have to put in the work like everybody else. So my first advice would be that: can you fall in love with the process? If the answer is no, then something else. It's not for everybody.
hmm
If the answer is yes, I would say go to a gym where they teach you the basics properly and just keep going. Like just in the beginning, it's all about repetition, 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 repetition. We used to drill footwork hours and hours on end, then adding stuff. Not even sparring. It was just like step forward, step backward, left, right,
hmm
pivot, then next round, add something more. Like literally, like you're like a little kid starting from scratch.
hmm
But that's what you need because recently one of my trainers said the difference between a Thai and a foreigner is not necessarily strength or like technique. What most foreigners are missing is basics. They miss footwork. He mostly said footwork. He says as soon as they have to move, their feet look messy and they look like they're on ice.
mm.
That's where a lot of problems happen.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. And so, one of the other things I want to ask about is how you approach the rest of your life with, sleeping, nutrition, everything like that, in order to set yourself up for success in the ring. So, I assume you're not one of these super obsessive biohacking guys because you did share that story just the other day about, having a Coke right before working out. So what is your approach to, being able to show up and perform as well as you can in the ring? And where would you say it's acceptable to, not be completely obsessive about what you're eating or how much sleep you're getting or anything like that? And then when is it like very important to have that 100% focused?
I think people misunderstand nutrition as a whole. And I've talked about this a lot on Instagram already. And actually, I'm happy I can share this again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that come to Thailand and they don't want to cook, so they go eat outside. So what they do is they eat like 3 meals, chicken and rice, for example, and then they drink a smoothie. They post it on Instagram and they say, "Oh, I'm eating 3,000 calories a day." And I just look at it and I'm like, "Yeah, I see 1,800 calories, maybe 2,000 max. Just volume eating. It looks like a lot, but it isn't a lot."
Mm-hmm.
So what I obviously do is I count calories, but I also understand food. Like I understand that if I eat chicken and rice, it takes time to digest. So I'm not gonna eat that close to training. When
Mm-hmm.
I closer to training, I need fast sugars because especially Muay Thai is very glycogenetic,
Yeah.
meaning like main source of fuel is sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, for my hard Muay Thai sessions, I drink a Coke, I need some fruit, eat some candy and some fruit, always like glucose and fructose combined. Then during the workouts, I'll eat some more candy in the middle of the workouts, always making sure that the tank is, yeah, people get so upset by it. It's so funny.
I was going to say, yeah, you just made a lot of people very angry.
And the Coca-Cola thing is like, I just doubled down on it. Once I figured out how triggered people were by me drinking Coke during the workouts, I just doubled down on it. I was like, this is a marketing thing.
And Yeah, to somebody that, like you said, obsesses about the chicken and rice and like a banana or whatever, and that's all they eat. That must be so disrespectful to see you just in the middle of the fight, just, you know.
Those people, I'd say, just add some flavor to your life. Like really, like obviously I eat
Uh-huh.
healthy. Like
Yeah.
majority of my meals are like good food, but like close, you just burn out anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Probably the time I upset most people was when I cut weight, and so I dropped all my water weight. I was on
Mm.
weight, and then I was okay. Now I'm gonna eat ice cream, and these people lost their mind. And I ate ice cream, by the way. You don't gain weight anyways. It's
Yeah,
like
ice cream isn't even that bad for you either.
no, it isn't. Well, but some people think it's bad. It's like, oh my god, it's sugar. Oh my god.
so yeah, understanding nutrition is very very important, especially when you do a sport like Muay Thai, because you train
Hmm.
so much. If you don't eat enough, you're just gonna burn out.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do anything else to prevent burnout aside from just, making sure that you have enough energy like in the food you're eating? Or are there anything else you do? Because one of the things that's I think maybe too much of a concern, but in the fitness space in general, especially with people that are going to be bodybuilders or power lifters or something like that, they worry about overtraining because they don't want to, put too much strain on any muscle group at any one time. Is that really a consideration for something that's more like cardio intensive, like Muay Thai?
I mean, I've overtrained a lot in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody once told me, "You're not overtrained; you're just under recovered." And actually, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I mean, training volume is very very high here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy, but if you fix your nutrition, you take your sleep seriously, even if you have like a normal job, you can still get by. Just need to people need to learn how to relax, and this
Mm-hmm.
is something that you actually talked about earlier, but we didn't go really into it.
Yeah.
But this whole hustle culture makes people so obsessed with being busy all the time that they're literally running themselves into burnout. And then when they're burned out, they're feeling guilty that they can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's such an unhealthy way of living. Like
Yeah.
sometimes on days where I'm really, really busy, so I train in the morning. Imagine I have to work all day and then have to go to training. Between the time that I drive to training and actually train, I just sit somewhere for 10 minutes and I do nothing. I just set aside time to make sure that I can relax. Because if you're always on the go, your destination is gonna be burnout.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot always be on the go. You have to take a break sometime.
Yeah.
And like during the day, you can take like small breaks from stuff. For example, say you're at work, you want to take a break from the people around you in the work, go walk to a coffee shop, take your
Mm-hmm.
headphones somewhere, just walk, something like that.
Yeah. I forget who it was, but there's someone I heard just the other day that was talking about, like you're saying, the hustle culture. And he made a really good point where he said staying on the grind for the sake of being on the grind is stupid. Because if you are just grinding and grinding and grinding away without a purpose, then eventually you're just left with dust. Like if you want to make a sculpture, but you're just grinding away at it, you're going to turn that piece of stone to dust and it's not going to give you anything. So it has to be very, like you're saying, intentional about when you go really hard and really intense, and then when you step back and give yourself that space to recollect and recover and everything like that. So that's a very good point. Um,
But if you look at like, so I started in 2016, like my website and then
mm-hmm.
Instagram, I had started that around the same time. If I look how many people are still left during those days that all promoted hustle culture and I wake up at 5 a.m. and
Mm.
all that motivational bullshit, the answer is one guy. There's one guy left. One guy that I
Wow.
know personally that's still going. And all the other guys with all their hustle culture, nothing came out of it except a deleted Instagram account. And maybe like a website that's gone now. But
Yeah.
I remember I had like a guy that mentored me for a while. He was like he started doing like the 5 a.m. club or something. And so basically
Oh yeah,
you
Robin
had to
Shawarma, I think.
that probably comes from him.
Yeah.
It was something like you sign up for a website, you pick a friend, and every time you have to check in at 5. If you don't check in, you owe the person money or something. It was something like that. And he was talking about it, and he was really proud. And I was like, dude, you can just literally set your alarm, send a picture, and go back to sleep. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point? And you look like you're about to drop that peak. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're doing. Then later,
Yeah.
that guy retired, and then he said like, "Oh, I hated the grind." And I was like, I think this is an issue with like a lot of people is that they don't have a middle ground. They
Mhm.
always go between extremes, and when you always go between extremes, like something is gonna go wrong very bad.
Mhm.
You see that with like diets, workouts, keto. The keto people go like carnivore, they go vegan. They always go to some crazy diet, but they never find the middle ground.
Mhm.
And they just hate on the people that stayed in the diet they were doing. Yeah.
Man, yeah, that is so true. So with respect to, the future and going forward, how long are you planning on being in Thailand?
Definitely.
Forever?
Forever, probably. I like the climate definitely a lot better. Like
Mm,
never really liked the Belgian climate. I always knew I was gonna live abroad. That was
mm.
set in stone since I was 40.
Oh wow.
I always liked everything exotic for some reason. So I was like,
Hmm.
well, I know what to do. Yeah. But honestly, very honest, I never thought about living here.
Mm.
I mean, I liked it here, but that it just happened on accident. I was still trying to figure out where I was gonna live back then. But then the lockdowns happened, and I was originally
Hmm.
supposed to go to New Zealand, but obviously that never happened. And then stayed here, and that's how everything kind of came together.
Awesome. Your account has definitely been very interesting. I'm glad we were able to, connect to make this work out. Very excited to see kind of how things work out with this going forward. Let's see. I had a final question and now I'm completely blanking on it. um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, just really appreciate the content you're putting out and being I dare say, a voice of reason, in the world. And I also really respect that, you've found the thing that you want to focus on and you're just going all in on it, because a lot of people, I mean, I don't know too many people that would be willing to travel literally to the other side of the earth to pursue the thing that they're interested in. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been an honor to have you. I'll obviously have your page and everything like that linked in the show notes. Do you have any other, uh, you mentioned a website, like where else can people find you and your work if they want to know more about you?
I actually want to leave with some advice before I go,
Oh,
and then
absolutely.
and drop it. Because you mentioned like not everybody will go to the end of the other side of the world, and not everybody will pursue what
Hmm.
they want to do. I think the majority of people they either really don't know what they want to do, which I have a solution for, or they know deep down what they want to do, but they think it's too risky. So for the people that don't know what they want to do in life, I think Alan Watts hit the nail on the head there when he said, like, ask yourself what you would do if money was no object. Like, what
Hmm.
would you do? That's actually a good question because when I was talking about this with a person back when I was living down south here, that person asked the question back to me. And my answer was, I would be doing this. I was living, I was doing what I wanted. And for some people, that was a shock back then because, like, oh,
Hmm.
I, I don't have the same answer. It's like, you have to figure it out. And everything comes at a time, but for different people have different timelines.
Hmm.
So what I figure out at 21, somebody else might figure it out at 58, and some people will never figure it
Hmm.
out.
Hmm. Now that is so important, because I feel like a lot of the times we compare ourselves to the standard of, we see other people have gotten to a certain point in life that we want to get to, and then we think, oh well, um, why didn't it work out for me? Like for example, one of my closest friends, one of the first guests we had on this show, his name is Joe McCarthy, and he is currently 21 years old. He's already married. He's killing it in business. He has a beautiful daughter, everything like that. It's very easy for me to look at that and be like, well, why am I not there already? But the fact of the matter is, he's been working on business since he was like 15 or 16. And that's just with his brand. Like he was even doing like a farm business and things like that before that. So he's gotten so much more work done than I have, even though we're the same age. It's like it makes sense. And I'm not serving myself or anyone else by just comparing that and being like, why am I not already there? So that's a very good point. And then you had a second point you wanted to make for the people that
Actually,
did
because
know.
you mentioned your brand, they always say like comparison is a thief of joy.
Thief of joy, yeah.
Yeah. So when people compare to other people, and obviously I'm not saying you're jealous, but like the majority of times when people look at other people, they look at what they've accomplished, and mostly they're like not jealous, but like they feel something wrongs them because somebody has something that they want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I want this and I want it now. And it's like, well, first of all, it's like you said, you didn't put in the time, so you didn't earn it yet. Second of all, you focus so much on what you want that you also forget to look at what you don't want. Like nobody has a perfect life and nobody has figured out everything. So maybe that person that you're envying is jealous of you because you have something that they want.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. I also personally, I draw a distinction between being jealous and being envious. I don't think that being jealous is inherently a bad thing because you see something that someone else has and you say, oh, I want that. I'm going to work for it. Envy is where you look at that and you say, oh, it's not fair that they have that. You know, they're somehow doing me an injustice by being ahead of me. And so that's kind of how I view that, is the difference in motivation. Because I think like I can be jealous of my friend without wishing him any ill will, and that's just more fuel and motivation for me to actually work to get to that point. But if I'm kind of stuck in my own head and it's all about me, and I should be at the top and everything like that, that's I think a very destructive way to live, because then you're always focused on what you don't have, as opposed to, like you're saying, other people can be jealous of you. You know, there's a saying I heard, I think I might have even come up in a previous show I did, where somebody said everybody wants to be a millionaire because they want to spend $1 million, not because they want to make $1 million. And the reason most people don't get to be a millionaire is because they don't want to put in the work that's required to get to that point. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing. Like you're saying, you know, money it's not the point of existence. It's just a means to an end. And so if you can be happy on, you know, 100K a year and live a fulfilling life, great, good for you. You know, that's, some people are going to be able to live with that and be happy with it, and other people are going to want more. And that just really depends on, like you're saying, the individual desires that we each have.
I like how you mean difference between being jealous and envy. Just cut it out and turn it into a clip. That's actually really good.
Yeah, it's not my thought originally. I think I got it from some saint or something like that, but I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. Like, yeah, I'm a Christian, and if you read the Bible, God actually describes himself as a jealous God, because the idea is like you're not supposed to give your heart to anything else, right? Whether it's some like pagan god, or love of money, or attachment to anything else in the world. It's like God is a jealous God because he wants your attention above all others, right? But it's not vicious or destructive in any way. So just an interesting frame that I've tried to really adopt over the past couple of years.
That's interesting. I like that idea.
Yeah.
And then, so the second point.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I always say, book the trip, take the flight. The view might be worth it. A lot of people, even me, when I planned out my first trip so well when I came over here, like financially, getting my job, everything was like scheduled out way ahead. Even I was nervous when I flew out. Like I was really nervous on the plane. Obviously, that was like the biggest trip of my life back then. Like looking back on it, some of the things I imagined, nothing happened, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
just had an amazing time. I won my fight. Yeah. It's like sometimes when people talk about decision making in general, they always say they postpone it and they always say, "Oh, I have time." First of all,
Mm-hmm.
you're not you don't have time. Time is running out. Second, like nobody has ever promised you that you're gonna live happily and old. That's
Mm-hmm.
not a given. I think about that a lot
Yeah.
because I had two people that I went to with. They went to high school with me and they died before they even were able to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like heart failure or something. Can't remember exactly, but the problem with the heart just died in her sleep, and the other one got hit by a drunk driver.
Wow.
It was both of them were like 18, 19. That makes you think
Yeah.
because there's probably, I mean, I hope not, but there's probably more. There's probably already more people that have passed away from people that I went to college with, high school with.
Mm-hmm.
So like the whole idea of like telling yourself, "Oh, I have time and I'll do it later," I find that idea very depressing, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
because these people kind of treat life like a spectator sport. It's like, and then you just see everybody like achieve things, and eventually you're just left behind. Sometimes it's really worth it. Just go for the adventure, whatever that adventure may be. For some people, the adventure might not be that big, but it will give them life lessons and life experience that will improve the quality of their life.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, that adventure might literally be like quitting their horrible job with a toxic boss, going to a new job. Maybe something like that. For some people,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big step.
Yeah.
For other people, it's traveling to the other side of the world. Like nobody has to nobody has to live the exact same life, and nobody has to do the exact same thing. But I think
Mm-hmm.
your main focus should always be to improve the quality of your life. Like you have to live life and care about your own life. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot be like go through life and be like, oh, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true that we really do need to be intentional because we don't know when that, well, when it's going to end really. There's the Roman philosopher Seneca has a line where he says, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and immortals in all that you desire." And the idea being like, we have all these big hopes and dreams and really lofty ambitions, but then we get stuck in our own heads and we say, "Oh, well, like you're saying, I can't because XYZ reasons." And then you get to the end of your life and you say, "I should have gone for that." And that's like, I don't want to die with regrets. I assume most people think the same way, but we still let ourselves be trapped by our own doubts and fears. Tony Robbins has one line that I really like where he says, "When you say you can't, that is when you must." And obviously, you can be an idiot with that. "Oh, you're saying I can't cheat on my wife, so I need to cheat on my wife." No, of course not. But the principle is like, if you have to come up with reasons, "Oh, I can't move across the world. I can't start this podcast. I can't," like you said, "quit a job or anything like that." That's when you've kind of found something that's going to be meaningful to you, because if it weren't, you wouldn't even be thinking like that. So that's really good stuff, man.
And eventually, it's gonna come back anyways
Mm-hmm.
because uh, 2017 and 2018, I traveled to Sweden twice. First time I went with a friend and I just visited the city and then I went to train there every day. Second time I went by myself and I went longer. And I remember I was thinking about just missing my flight. I
Mm.
was like laying in a, it was a sunny day in Stockholm. I was laying in a park and I was like, if I miss my flight, my job might be upset, my parents might be upset. But I actually really like the gym and I like the city too. I was training at like a gym with like UFC. Gustafsson was there.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I didn't do it. And then later, one of the guys that I trained with actually offered me a place to stay, like a second room.
If you want, you can rent it. I know you wanna come back. And I was like, and then I made all these reasons why I couldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
Only to quit my job 6 months later and go to Thailand further.
Wow.
Yeah, there was not a lot of time between that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe a year and a half. No, a year and a half. I know there was a year between it, more than a year and a half. But it was always like in the back of my mind. Back then, I was like, what would have happened if I stayed?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, obviously, you let it go. But when I decided to quit my job, which was the first time, and the whole time I was there, I was on time. I remember this is the right decision.
Yep. I'm referencing a lot of people. I forget who said this, but there's somebody else that has a line that goes, we suffer more from basically indecision than reality, because as long as you're waiting to make a decision on something, your mind is coming up with all these, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? But then the second you commit to something, your brain just says, okay, this is what we're doing now. And it's usually nowhere near as bad as you as you think it will be.
Mostly you can figure it out along the way. And if you can't, there's always people that kind of have had like a similar journey, or had like similar issues. Like eventually you'll run into people where you kind of have like, oh, we have things in common and we can help each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a lot of people, when they want to go on an adventure, they think they're gonna be alone. And maybe sometimes when you travel to the other side of the world, yeah, or just move, even move, yeah. Don't do it; it's dangerous. Hypothetically, or even if you just move cities, you might be like, "Oh, I don't know anybody there. It's scary."
Mm-hmm.
But once you get there, you'll start to learn about the city. You will meet new people. You'll find people with similar interests. Eventually, the ball has to start rolling.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to make no progress in life. I mean, it is possible, but you understand what I mean?
You almost have to try to not make progress. Yeah.
Yeah, you almost have to do a lot of effort to make zero progress. So you might as well put the effort to make something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is so true, man. Awesome. Well, yeah, so thank you again for coming on. This has really been an awesome conversation. What I asked earlier was, do you have any other places aside from the Instagram that people can check you out and find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, everything is in the link in my description. But zeroalpha.com. There's a lot of my older work on there. I have the Zero to Alpha Substack, which is like my newer work, which I'm more a fan of, to be honest. And then Instagram, Twitter, all Zero to Alpha, everybody.
Okay. Awesome. But yeah, thanks again, brother. Yeah, guys, please go do check out Alex's page. Obviously, I'll have it linked in the show notes and everything like that if you want to see more from him. And yeah, it again, it's been really fascinating just following your brand as someone that is not Thai, in Thailand, introducing such a massive change into their life, and then everything that's come of it. So yeah, thanks again, man.
Yeah, this was really fun. If you ever want to do a podcast again, we should do a podcast about the time I fought a murderer in prison in Thailand.
It's kind of couldn't really hear that with the mic. Yeah.
Said this was a really fun conversation. If you ever want to do a podcast again, I actually fought in prison here, like inside a prison, and I fought a murderer. So if you ever want to have like a cool bedtime story,
yeah, yeah, that would be really cool, man. Awesome. I do need to get going here, but next time, absolutely.
Okay, man. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, take care, brother. And that concludes episode 15 of the Operation Paragon podcast. You can find Alex at 02alpha on Instagram and other social media platforms, as well as on 02alpha.com. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to follow Operation Paragon on Instagram for more. And until next time, remember that greatness is within your reach.